the filament didn't have anywhere to go, so it started shooting out the sides of the nozzle and the heat block and everything. I don't know what happened. I woke up and I was like, okay, well, I'm awake, so I'm gonna go check on my print and see how it's doing. I walked in and I am hit with a face of just smoke, and it smells like plastic, and I'm like, oh.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Meet the Makers podcast. Today I am joined by our guest. He 3D prints amazing props and cosplay pieces, and he also does awesome summaries and spoilers of all things Star Wars, so if you're a fan of that, you absolutely have to check him out. I have Tim here from Odin Actual. Tim, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here and talk about what I do and meet you and just discuss 3D printing.
Likewise, I'm super excited to have you on here. Preparing for today, I was going through your content, and I have to say, it seems like you've been making content on TikTok, or you call it the Clock app, which I think is hilarious. I noticed you've been making content for quite a while on there, and you're really consistent with it. You make a lot of content. Was that kind of your first introduction to TikTok to making content, or have you been doing that before?
I goofed around on Vine when Vine was like a thing, but I never went anywhere. And then my fiance actually, when COVID first started happening, was like, hey, you should check out TikTok. You should, it's funny. And I was like, okay, yeah. So I got into it and was like, oh, I could make content. I could goof around with people. That sounds like fun. So yeah, I just started goofing around with the Star Wars content and just fell into it.
That's cool. Yeah, like I said, you seem like you're just really natural on camera, and you have really fun, unique series and different things that you do. So it's been fun just going through your content. When you started, was cosplaying, like 3D printing, something that you started having in mind? That's where you wanted to go, or was that kind of just like how it transitioned over time?
Not at all. I never saw myself doing cosplay or 3D printing or anything. I was just like, I want to talk about Star Wars. I want to nerd out with some people about Star Wars. And then I just started seeing people dress up and I was like, wow, this is really cool. I want to do this. And it's always been like the next step in my content has always been like, because it looks cool, because it looks like fun. And I'm a huge proponent of, if it looks like fun, you should definitely try it.
Yeah, it's 3D printing. If anybody's listening and doesn't 3D print, I can say firsthand it's a lot of fun.
It is so much fun.
Yeah, and you seem to fall into this category too, but it seems like people start out like pretty small, one printer, and then it just explodes over time. One thing I noticed in your early content is I think you were printing on a 3D printer. It was the Longer brand, I want to say.
Yeah.
I don't see a lot of people using that. How did you stumble upon that printer?
So I actually stumbled upon that printer thanks to Frankly Built. He was doing a giveaway for an LK4 Longer 3D printer. And I was like, you know what? If Frank is good enough to say this is a printer I'm willing to like give away and endorse, I was like, that's a good idea. So I ended up buying one. It was about the same price as an Ender 3. Basically runs like an Ender 3 with a touchscreen. It's
interesting to say also, Frankly Built, he comes up every time. There's so much love around the community for him. He's great,
he's a staple in the community.
He really is, yeah. I was actually curious when I started seeing your content with it, because like I said, I wasn't very familiar with that printer, but I went to their website, I was checking it out, and they are very heavy in marketing that it's a super quiet printer. I'm curious from your side, would you say it is quiet, or how does it kind of stack up to other printers?
So it does have dual fan, like most printers, and they market their fans as a silent running fan, and it starts off silent, but everything else over time, they do get louder. So I actually just found they run a lot quieter. If you take the second fan off and it still runs the same, they probably don't want people doing that, but they did that and it works out.
Hey, if it works, I guess. I have this printer behind me all the time, and it's like my workhorse printer. It works super well. I love it, but honestly, I need to find a different spot for it, because if I'm doing like a podcast like this, or I work from home, so I sit here constantly, and I won't run it while I'm at work just because it is like so loud in the background. Yeah.
I have looked at ways of making printers quieter, because I also have my printers in my workspace and they are loud. So I've looked at several things, and one of the most unique ways I think I've seen of people silencing their printers is they will find a spot to put the printer. They will cut a piece of memory foam about the size of a square block or something like that.
Yeah.
And then they will put a cinder block on top of that memory foam and then put their printer on top of that. And it is level and it is quiet because you don't have the extra rattling. And it also helps fix some of the Z movement that you can like have issues with.
That is so... I've never heard somebody say that before, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Interesting. I'm going to have to go out to the store later.
I've ingested quite a lot of very weird 3D printing solutions on YouTube. And there's a lot out there that people do, and a lot of it works.
Yeah, it's so you can go down these weird rabbit holes almost of it's so many different things that you can spec into of improving your printer or quieting down your printer. Yeah, it's an endless hobby that you can delve into. On that note of dialing things in with your printer, this was like kind of something quickly that you mentioned in your content before, but I saw that you level your bed with a feeler gauge. I was wondering if you could possibly talk more about that because I have one and I don't use it and I probably should.
Okay, let me actually find my feeler gauge real quick. This is a feeler gauge. I swear by it. It is an excellent tool for 3D printing. And essentially, instead of trying to use a piece of paper to guess the accurate depth for 0.2 millimeters, this has a separate sheets of metal at that gauge. And you can use whatever gauge, whatever height you want to set it to, and get a more accurate level every time.
Yeah, I hear some people who use it and they seem to swear by it. So essentially what you do with it is you just, as you're going through the different points on your bed, you just put that under there and just level it to that exact spot on it as opposed to dragging your paper around.
Yep. And it is 100% more effective than a piece of paper.
Yeah, it's something I heard people talk. It might have honestly even been you. You might have been the person who recommended it to me at some point. But I went out, I bought one. I never got into actually using it. But another thing, I'm going to have a lot of things to start optimizing on my printer when we get off this call. Yeah, I'll have to try that again.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, for you do a lot of prints that are like big, like helmets, cosplay pieces. I think you have a CR10 too. How often when you're doing those pieces do you have problems with, I guess, maybe warping, or is that a problem for you when you're doing these bigger things?
So I usually don't have a problem with warping because there's a setting in Cura that I use where you start with the inside layer and then work your way to the outside. So you don't end up bulging your outside layers with the interior print. So I usually don't have any warping problems. Unless it's, I don't know, hot outside or something like that. But the biggest issue that I find with large prints is layer shift. And the CR10 is just notorious if you need to do a filament change, you will probably have a layer shift or you will have layers running into each other. And that is at the fault of the CR10, not the printer, because every time that the CR10 returns to home, which it does when you have to do a filament change, it loses level. I don't know why. It's reported through multiple CR10s, but when it returns home, it loses level, and then you end up with a really nasty layer.
Yeah, I wonder if it's a Creality thing in general, because I've also noticed that if I pause a printer, if I do like a filament swap on my prints, yeah, every time it seems to have a problem with the layer. And I think my printers, they've just gone rogue at this point, but occasionally I'll have it where they'll start at a completely different place on the build plate, not even like in terms of level, just in terms of like complete axis is way off. So I don't know what goes on with that, but strange things seem to happen for me when I press pause on my printer.
3D printing software is just wacky in general. It'll do some just unique things unexpectedly, and it's usually there's a lot of time where it's not user error, and it baffles me.
Yeah, it's definitely a little unpredictable, but it's worth the fun.
It's getting better, though. It's getting a lot better, especially with the new Cura update. I think it was 5.31 or something like that. It's a pretty good piece of software.
Yeah, it really is. It's nice that it's free too. For being a free piece of software, it's really fantastic. There's a lot of flexibility in there. So
I am a huge proponent of free. Free is good.
Yes, absolutely. On the topic of printers doing strange things and going rogue, I know one of the things that you had talked about at one point was you were running an overnight print on one of your printers and you actually had a situation where it caught on fire. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I was doing an overnight print. The print lost adhesion to the bed and it ended up sticking to the nozzle, and the filament didn't have anywhere to go, so it started shooting out the sides of the nozzle and the heat block and everything. I don't know what happened. I woke up and I was like, okay, well, I'm awake, so I'm gonna go check on my print and see how it's doing. I walked in and I am hit with a face of just smoke, and it smells like plastic, and I'm like, oh, this isn't good. First thing I do is unplug the printers. I didn't care what other prints were running at the time. I just unplugged all of them, and I just took a metal putty knife, and started scraping off the plastic to try and stop the smoking and everything like that. But once it had all cooled and hardened and stuff like that, I was like, okay, we need to make sure print adhesion is secure next time. And ever since then, I don't have prints coming off my bed.
Yeah, that's honestly, that's like worst case. That's one of my biggest fears. I don't run overnight prints super often, but occasionally I will run them. And yeah, I mean, that's, I think for a lot of people, something that is a little scary when they think about it.
It's not something I was thinking about until it happened. And I think it's something that needs to be talked about, because people will do overnight prints like willy-nilly and not assess the risk that comes with 3D printing, because you are using a self-heating device that gets up to 250 degrees Celsius sometimes. It's hot. It's hot enough to start a fire.
Yeah, it's something that I think you can get so familiar with the machine and just be like, oh, it's fine. And I want to say it was Uncle Jesse, maybe somebody else. I can't remember who it was, but a similar thing that you were talking to, where maybe they got a new printer, they ran it for the first time, thought it was fine, walked away, and I think a similar thing had happened. Yeah, definitely something that I think is worth talking about more. And when you're new, it might not be the first thing that comes to mind, but definitely a serious concern for people. Now, after that happened, do you have a new method for what you use for bed adhesion after experiencing that?
Yeah, so I use Elmer's glue. I use an Elmer's glue water solid glue stick, and I just put it on, and it sticks so much better. It's a very simple, easy solution. I'm a fan of simple.
That's interesting. Yeah, I have an entire classroom-sized pack of glue sticks over here right now, and I was just posting the other day about wondering if glue sticks actually are used for adhesion, because there seems to be people on, they're like two like very distinct sides, and actually I just had somebody comment this morning, they're like, of course it's not for adhesion, it doesn't help at all, blah blah blah, but I don't care what anybody says, I feel like it works. I don't know.
I full-heartedly believe that it is for adhesion, but it also, I've been noticing recently on prints that have a flat bottom, if I use glue on the bottom, I'll sometimes get an impression of like parts of the glue stick, maybe I put too heavy. So I think it's also like a texture grabbing thing as well.
Interesting. Yeah. No, it's like I said, I swear by it, and at the end of the day, it only cost maybe a penny to lay it down. So I feel like it's good peace of mind for me. I like using it.
Exactly.
I'm team glue stick over here. Now, you do really amazing jobs post-processing them.
Thank you.
They're, for anybody, again, who, if they don't follow you, go check out your work. It's really just like very in-depth, and you seem to crank out a ton of helmets. I was surprised going back through your content, how many you crank out. One of the things that I saw happen to you along your journey of post-processing, I can't remember what helmet was specifically, but you had done a clear coat over it, and there seemed to be like a reaction with the clear coat. I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Do you know why that happened? I've never seen something like that happen before.
Actually, speaking of Frankly Built, as we did recently, he put out a video about the same thing that happened to that helmet. It happened to get some reptile scaling. We were actually using the exact same products. It was 1K Clear Coat, and 1K Clear Coat just has an ability to react sometimes, and that's just like the gamble that you're taking with it. Sometimes paint will react poorly. It could be some dust. It could be the temperature. It almost literally anything. And your paint could get ruined. And then you have to start over, or you got to sand it down. And it sucks, but it's just part of the process. It's part of the experience.
Yeah, it's everything with 3D printing and like the maker hobby. It seems like it's a lot of just trial and error, and there's no such thing as 100% guarantee that things work. But I think that's part of the fun in it, and part of the piece of the hobby that I really enjoy is just figuring out those unique scenarios. For you, as you lay down a print for a super long time, you sand it down, do Bondo on it, all that stuff. Do you ever get nervous getting to the point of when you're printing it? Is that like stressful for you, or is it just like happy to see it reaching the end of the project?
I get sad sometimes when I get to the end of a project because I've put so much effort into this thing and I get to see it and it's very cool and I'm very happy and proud of what I've done. But the work is done. That's my joy of doing some of these projects is doing the work and then I'm done. I'm like, time to make something else.
Yeah, no, I definitely can relate to that. I keep all my prints, so I don't have to worry about this. But you work on these amazing pieces and then you sell them often. Is it like difficult kind of parting with these sometimes, or how is that for you?
Yeah, famously, my profile picture for my TikTok is a helmet that I sold, and I love that helmet. I think it's very cool. It's one of my favorite helmets I ever made, but I sold it, so I don't have it anymore. And yeah, I make some really cool stuff for some really cool people, and I'm happy they get to enjoy the cool stuff. Sometimes I wish I'd made two.
For the people who you sell stuff to, do they tend to be like, are they other creators possibly who you like keep in touch with, or do you ever get to see maybe your props like used in conventions?
Yeah, I do see a lot of my stuff at conventions, which is very cool, very surreal for me. I've seen some of my cosplay art, some of my cosplay armor that I've printed in news articles, and I'm like, wow, I helped with that. That's really cool. But I actually recently ended up quit doing commissions because it is hard to make something like that. But another thing that I really do enjoy doing is pro bono work for other creators, other small creators, and just people in the community in general, because I think creators do a lot of good stuff. And the creators that I do think do good stuff, I think deserve cool stuff. So I end up making stuff from like their favorite, whatever they talk about, and send it in the mail to them. And they're like, whoa, this is unexpected. I'm like, you do cool stuff. You talk about good things and you bring a community close together. You deserve something cool.
That's so cool to hear. And yeah, so many people out there who just make such inspiring content. And it's unique that I think TikTok particularly, maybe it's just my feed and what I get recommended, but I see so many people who have such specific talents and such specific crafts, and it's really inspiring to just see how much time and how much work can go into these different things. And it's cool in the sense that for you can pass that on to other people, and maybe when they share that with their audience, maybe it inspires people to explore 3D printing and get into other stuff all around. The way that whole ecosystem works, it's really interesting to hear.
I've had a lot of people tell me that some of my content has got them into 3D printing, and it's really it means a lot to me to hear something like that, because I think 3D printing is definitely like a future and we can do a lot of really cool stuff with it. So the more people that get into it, the more excited I get. And it's just, I don't know, I love it.
Yeah, though, likewise, it's cool to see all the different areas that I can spec into. Off that topic, like, I know there's in different industries, obviously we're in the more what you would consider hobbyist space of you do props and cosplays. I do less cool stuff, goofy stuff on my end.
No, you do cool stuff.
Thank you, I appreciate it. But there's a ton of applications in technology too that are really cool that I don't think maybe people who aren't interested in 3D printing might not realize. But are there like any technologies that you see being used in that like particularly interest you a lot right now?
Yes. So the medical application of 3D printing is insane. I have seen 3D printed organs, prosthetics are next level. It's so much farther than just printing a replacement arm. You can make something that people can control with their muscles, where they can close their hand where they've never had a hand before. We're able to test drugs for Alzheimer's on small itty bitty 3D printed brains. And we're so close to finding something that can help those people because of 3D printed technology. People who get their bones crushed in traumatic accidents can now have steel replacements printed for them at the hospital. The imagination for this kind of technology is limitless.
Yeah, it's something I started looking into recently, and when I first started coming across the articles of this, it seems like it's almost not real. Like it sounds sci-fi. It sounds like it's
insane.
possible. It's so cool. Yeah. Yeah, exciting to see how that's going to push the boundaries of just people who are maybe involved in bad accidents or organ transplantless. I know that's such like a difficult thing for people to live in their daily life who are waiting for those organs. So it's really exciting to see how that's potentially going to impact so many people as that
Millions of
technology kind of
lives.
advances. Yeah.
It's just, there is definitely a future for 3D printing in almost every applicable field that there is today. And I have friends who work at CNC factories that are getting into additive technology as well. And they're discovering 3D printing. I'm like, yeah, I do that as a hobby. What you do for work, I do for fun. And it's interesting to see how this technology is starting to make its way into from hobby, small scale hobby, to industrial additive manufacturing.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind for me, I'm sure you've seen these videos online, but there's the people who like 3D print the houses now,
Yes.
which it's another application that I see, and it's crazy to think, and it looks shockingly similar as though you just expanded up the size of a 3D printer, how the layer lines go down. But yeah, just so many cool things happening in technology right now that
I will say the one thing I don't like about the 3D printed houses is, like with most of my prints, the build lines.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I'm not a big fan of it.
Yeah, when I first saw those, I thought the same thing. I was like, oh, I don't know if this is for me. But I have seen some more of the finished products, and I don't know why I didn't like put two and two that they would do this together. But obviously the inside of the houses, they finished them with standard drywall. Inside looks pretty normal. The outsides, I think it's something you might have to learn to love a little bit. But yeah.
I'm out there with Bondo and trying to sand down the
sanding down the entire house. Oh, man. Yeah, it's, I don't know. I don't think it would be my first choice, but something is, I guess, inherently cool about, as a 3D printer, at least being able to be like, yeah, my house is 3D printed too, and 3D printing inside my house. I guess a weird type of inception there.
That would be pretty wild.
Yeah. Now, like on the note of, we talked about 3D printing and like its applications in medicine. One of my favorite series that you had done earlier on, I'm not sure if you still do it still, but you had the series where you were this like healer type character and you would talk through different Star Wars people and like what they were coming in with. Can you tell people a little more about that series? Because I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, so I came up with a Jedi healer character who, his name was Cam, and he would go through the Star Wars galaxy basically during the Clone Wars era, as just being a begrudging medic to these characters and having terrible bedside manner and just cracking jokes. And it's funny to me because I used to serve in the Navy, and that's the kind of person I was. I was this guy who, he'd take care of you and make sure you were taken care of, but I was going to crack jokes at you the whole time.
Yeah, like I said, if for anybody who hasn't seen that series, I know you have it like all bulked together on a playlist, and I've just recently started getting into Star Wars for the first time. I'm just going through it now, and thank you. Even as somebody who's not super familiar with all the intricacies of the series, like it was just such a fun series to watch, and it's cool hearing you talk about it. Seems like it's inspired by real life, like the character. Yeah,
there's some truth to some of the stuff that I do and in that series, and I don't do it anymore, but it was fun for me. It was a way for me to deal with a lot of the trauma that I had actually experienced when I was in the Navy, and in a way getting to do those skits and make entertainment out of events that were almost life-changing for me provided a lot of healing.
Yeah, I have to imagine for people watching it too, I have to imagine it was probably a series that was relatable in a lot of ways for different people, and it seemed very popular. People really enjoyed it.
I'm glad you enjoyed it as well. I look back at it now, and sometimes I feel a little cringe about doing it, but I'm also just very glad that people still enjoy it.
Yeah, I think its cross-section into different fields was something that was really cool for people to see. And I laugh when you said that character's personality, maybe like your real personality was this healer that maybe doesn't have the best bedside manner or will crack jokes at people, but I think maybe I have a dark sense of humor, but I think that can almost in a weird way be comforting for some people to have that type of approach and care.
A lot of the veterans that I took care of in a hospital were actually very appreciative that I had that kind of demeanor, because it made them feel more at home, like they were hanging out with one of their friends instead of receiving medical care in a hospital.
I can definitely see that. I think it's when you're in healthcare, especially if you've never had to have procedures or be in a hospital type setting before, I think it can be like a kind of strange and like foreign place, but to have something that is just a little more close to home and comforting, I feel like that was probably made a big difference for people.
Yeah, it's just part of the job, making people feel good.
That's awesome. Now, one of the things you did talk about in there as well is looking back at that content and maybe feeling, oh, I don't know, is it like, not like knowing how to feel about your content when you look back on it. And I know for me, that's something I feel all the time looking back, even like a couple months ago. I'm like, oh man, that's a little cringe. But how has that process been for you, like experiencing your content grow?
It can be a lot sometimes. I've dealt with imposter syndrome, feeling I don't deserve the following that I have, or people aren't like really interested in what I'm doing. I'm just like shouting into the void. So it can take a huge toll on you mentally. And I am a huge advocate of people just not posting if they don't feel like posting. Yeah. And I know that you're like, oh, but the algorithm, or I gotta stop. Just full stop. Take care of yourself, please. You can't continue to make good content or consistent content if you don't feel okay. So you need to take care of yourself before you can take care of your content.
That's so important for people. And I know for me, there's been times where I just do this for fun, but even still, you can get so wrapped up in this trap of I have to post every day or I have to do this. And I think it's important to step back and realize at the end of the day, I mean, obviously it's maybe a little different for people who are doing this as a living, but I think it's important to step back and say, listen, it's okay. I don't have to do this. And if you're not having fun with it, I think it's almost better to maybe take a break from it. At least for me, I feel like it can come through in your content if you're just making a video to put out a video or not actually having fun in what you do. Yeah, I agree. I'm a big proponent of taking breaks when you need to and doing what feels comfortable for you there.
If you're constantly hammering something and you usually carry like a sense of enthusiasm or something for it, over time, it's what you're hammering is going to start to feel like work, and you're going to not like to do work, and then you just end up not doing it at all. And I'd rather keep doing something that I know that I enjoy, but take a break from it and come back to it later.
Completely agree. I definitely had other types of social media that I've done in the past where it feels like a job after a while, and it can lose that magic of being the thing that you're excited about. Now, one of the things that I've seen you also struggle with, and this might be something that's like a little more unique to you in the types of props that you make and the content that you make, but you seem to get hammered by the clock app with having community guidelines things and all that stuff. Can you maybe speak a little bit to how that has been and just what that process has been like?
Yeah, so first thing that I've stopped doing to stop getting guideline strikes was stop showing my weapons props. If it looks like a firearm, I don't show it anymore. I made this beautiful blaster back here. It's a Westar 35 from Star Wars. I can't show it on TikTok because they'll be like, no, thank you. But there's like plenty of people on shooting ranges and all this other kind of stuff. So it seems funny to give the guideline strike to the guy who's, look, I got this cool plastic toy. And
yeah.
But so the first thing, stop doing that. And then I just started posting that kind of content on Instagram, and it's been working better there. So that's all I did was just like a content shift, was blasters, weapons, props, that kind of stuff is for Instagram, helmets, cosplay armor, and sometimes bladed props for TikTok.
Yeah, TikTok seems to be really stringent. I've had, not as many as you, but I've had a couple videos of mine where they've gotten taken down, and a lot of times it's like shocking almost. I'm like baffled that is something that is too much for their platform. But have you found yourself, it's interesting you said going over to Instagram. I hear a lot of people seem to feel like that platform has a little more freedom for creators in terms of what they're posting and things like that. Do you see yourself maybe being like a little more drawn to going to that platform in the future, or is TikTok still the place that you like to post primarily? So
TikTok is where a majority of my audience is. So I will probably continue to post on TikTok until it's dead. And that is probably going to be my main area. But I actually do see myself moving over towards live streaming more. Okay. I recently, just this past week, bought a new PC for Jedi Survivor because my PC currently is a brick and it's capable of doing this, but like anything else, and not so much. But with this new PC, I'll be able to do live streaming. I'll be able to just do more content and have it look nicer. But for the most part, it's going to be TikTok, Twitch, and sometimes some Instagram posts if I get one of my friends to take some cool pictures of me.
That's awesome. As you start getting into the live streaming side of things, do you find, like, obviously the way that you approach making content as a streamer versus as somebody who's making shorts or TikToks, that type of content is like pretty different. Do you find it to be challenging to shift between those mindsets or manage, I guess, like where to put your time into going onto these different platforms?
I've had a lot of training as far as live streaming through TikTok because they have their live feature. So I've familiarized myself with how I should pace myself, my live content, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's a little bit of a switch that you have to turn over, because when I'm making like TikTok videos, I gotta be fast. You've got anywhere between 15 seconds to 60 seconds to like actually really capture someone's attention, or otherwise they're just gonna scroll away. So you got to be quick about catching someone's attention when you're posting the short form. But when you're doing the live stream, you got to pace it out and make people want to stick around longer.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't do much long form content these days. I used to back in the day, but I know even when I would post more long form YouTube videos as opposed to the short form, like you said, I feel like at least for me, I feel like I almost have to like boost up my energy levels. And like you said, just pace it a little faster when you're doing that short form, because the attention is quick of how it shifts there. Yeah, it definitely feels like a different type of mindset that you have to be in.
Yeah. And just in live streaming, you also have to like project a lot more. Whereas like when you're doing the short form, the camera's right here, the microphone's right here. So you don't really have to say a whole lot. But when you're doing live streams, you got to like project and make yourself excited. And again, like also trying to get that person who's just like passing by their attention real fast as well. So it's all about people's attention spans.
Now, you seem to have a pretty good grasp on identifying like the different ways to approach people's attention spans, and obviously your content's been wildly successful on TikTok. People really enjoy it. Do you have advice maybe for somebody who's looking to get into starting creating content on that platform for the first time and growing their audience?
Be patient. It's hard. I know a lot of people make it look really easy, but making content is hard, and making entertaining content is even harder. But if you are patient, you will find people who love what you do, love what you talk about, and will want to build a community around what you're doing. And I think that's great. I think TikTok is great for building or starting communities like that for people who normally don't have a shot at building communities. So if you're looking to get your start in content, I highly recommend TikTok, and just being you and being excited about being you.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, particularly what you said about being excited about being you. I think one of the best things that it took me a while to learn, but not trying to imitate someone else's style, and just like really leaning into what your personality is and what you think is cool. And I think it's when you're authentically you, I think you'll find kind of your people in your group, and that's for both sides of that relationship. I think it's really fun.
What caught my eye with your content was when you put filament through your nose, and I was like, "Yep, these are my people. These are my type of creators." Seeing that and seeing just like how goofy you are and like how interactive you are with your content, and just you're a very entertaining person. You should be very proud of your content.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And yeah, there's definitely, I'm sure, the type of people out there who would watch me string a filament through my nose and not be their cup of tea, but I think that's okay too. I'm certainly not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I think it's better for me. I like just having my group of, I guess, fellow misfits, you could say. So it all works out in the end.
I was talking to one of my friends recently, and I was saying that there's a very small group of 3D printers, and I like to call them the alternative printers.
Yeah.
And I wholeheartedly believe you fall into the category of alternative printers.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I think alternative would be a good word to use there. So yeah, no, I agree with that. Kind of staying in tune with giving advice for people who want to make content. Are there things that you would give advice for people who are looking to get into making props? And I guess, did you find yourself having the transition of maybe starting out and projects not coming out how you were hoping for, and then seeing that skill develop over time?
Yeah. So one of my first prints was something that I actually personally did not print. It was something I bought from Aaron Hughes at Galactic Armory. Great 3D modeler, great printer, great content. Go check him out. I bought a helmet from him and it looks awful. I'm going to be really honest. It looks really awful. It looks good on camera, but as soon as you get close to it, it loses its magic. But it's the first thing I ever worked on. It's the first thing I ever made, and I love it. And it's always going to be a part of me. But after I finished that prop, I was like, yeah, this is something I'm going to have to build up. It's gonna have to be a skill that I work on. It is a labor, and there's a learning curve, but sticking with it has incredible payoffs.
It's interesting hearing you say that about if you get a little too close to it on camera, the magic kind of goes away. Is somebody who you've done commissions on props before, you also make content with props, do you find yourself having a different maybe level of what you consider finished for a prop that's like what might be a camera prop as opposed to what might be something that's like getting shipped out to somebody to hold and interact with in real life?
Yes, there's a certain level. Whereas, so if I'm doing like something cosplay, I'm going to be walking around in it. I don't expect people to, like, what are you wearing? I don't, if you're that close, I'm going to ask you to back up. But if I'm like making something that's going to sit on someone's shelf that they're going to get real close and look at, I want to make sure the layer lines are gone. I want to make sure it's nice and smooth to the touch. If there's texture that's there, I want it to be there. And these are all things that come with practice and testing and finding what's good for you. But there's a very distinct level of difference between a cosplay prop and what I would consider a display prop.
Interesting. Now, on like the cosplay side of things, how do you like often go to conventions and get to wear your own cosplays that you've made?
I actually surprisingly do not go to a lot of conventions, and I want to. I really want to. I'm so busy all the time. I just remodeled my house, and now I'm like, I'm settled here and I'm ready to like start going to conventions again. And but the few conventions that I have been to, I've always worn one of my helmets because it's fun. It's one of those places where I can wear a helmet and no one's going to be like, oh, what are you doing?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I've never gone to a convention, but I see people, I don't know, I don't think you've been because you just said that you haven't been recently, but I saw recently they had that Rocky Mountain Rough. I never know how to say that. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but it's a 3D printing one. But it's to your point, like you were saying, if you could wear like a helmet to a standard convention and nobody bats an eye, it was like the same thing. I saw this whole room full of like 3D printers. It just looked like a fun experience to have of getting to be in a room full of people who you all have that same level of nerdiness around something.
I am trying to normalize at my gym, though, the fact that I'm going to come in and lift with my Mandalorian helmet on. As part of a content thing, it's definitely breaking my comfort zone, but I think it would genuinely be good content to just go into the gym with my Mandalorian helmet and lift.
Oh man, I hope you pursue that because I feel like that could turn into such a great series, and I feel like you'd end up being surprised. I bet a lot of people probably at the gym would unexpectedly be like super into it.
I've approached some people at the gym who've got like some Star Wars stuff on. I'm like, oh hey, I make these, and show them my Instagram. I'm like, oh. I'm like, yeah, if you ever want to see any, just let me know. I'll bring them to the gym.
Yeah, no, I like I said, I really hope you make that series because that sounds like that would be really cool.
It's very high up on my list.
Yeah. Now, I guess like in that theme of cosplays that you've done, or is there like a cosplay that you really stands out that you've done that maybe is your favorite? And then on the other side of that, is there a cosplay that you haven't done that you really want to do?
Yes. So the cosplay that I've done that was my absolute favorite was my Darth Nihilus cosplay. And the reason why is I 3D printed the mask for it. And a lot of people go with this bright white kind of for Darth Nihilus mask and color scheme, but I dirtied it up and I made it look battle damaged and more true to like what I would think his mask would look like instead of something nice and clean. And just wearing like all the black robes and the mask and not really actually being able to see my face. I felt bad. So it was empowering. It was cool. A cosplay that I do want to do. So Galactic Armory Aaron has recently made these Halo Spartan helmets that are a cross between Halo and Star Wars.
Okay.
And they look incredible. And what I want to do is I want to take one of the Mandalorian helmets that he's designed as like a Spartan helmet and then print all the Spartan armor and
Okay.
be this big hulking Mandalorian Spartan. I think that would look really cool.
That sounds cool. Interesting. A couple of things there. So I guess one of the things that you said, like, you in the cosplay that you really enjoy, you're like, oh, I just feel bad wearing that. I don't know what it is, but I've noticed a couple of people that I've talked to who do cosplays, they seem to really enjoy, I don't know if this is something that you can relate to, but seem to really enjoy cosplaying like villains. Is that a thing? Is that normal?
Yeah, it's always fun to pretend to be the bad guy because you're not actually the bad guy, but it's I'm this person that like other people are afraid of. And it's cool walking around and seeing reactions of people and people being like, that's so cool. Oh my God, it looks so real. I honestly do it all for the attention. I'm going to be real. I do it all for the attention. And it's just fun. There's no other way to describe it. It's just a lot of fun.
That's interesting. Do you find, have you ever had interaction? I've never gone to one of these events before, but do you have any interactions that stand out of maybe people like being interested in the cosplays that you've done or like coming up to you? Or are people ever like scared of the cosplays when you guys do them?
No, I haven't done a lot of out and about cosplaying because I'm a big wimp, but the helmets and stuff that I've made, people have always come up to me and been like, yo, this is really cool. What did you make it out of? And I tell them a 3D printer. And the first thing that people always tell me when I made it on a 3D printer is, I wish I had the money for a 3D printer. You probably do.
Yeah.
You probably do have money for a 3D printer. The 3D printing technology is incredibly affordable nowadays. I'm not saying that it's cheap, but it's more affordable than what it has been in the past. But it's just always fun to get reactions out of people.
Yeah, I have to imagine it's probably really fun and just like you said, getting the attention and seeing people's reactions, especially when it's such like a labor of love of something that you've spent so much time on. I feel like that probably makes it extra special. Not that it's not cool just doing it in general, but when you've spent all those hours crafting something, that's got to be really cool.
It definitely is.
Now, on the flip side of that, you mentioned like a crossover between a Halo and a Star Wars cosplay. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him on TikTok. I wish it's something Moses. You might know who I'm talking about. He has an entire room full of like filament and stormtrooper helmets, but one of the crossovers that he does, which might sound a little goofy, I absolutely love. He has like this Hello Kitty stormtrooper helmet, which I just think is the coolest thing ever. He does a bunch of crossovers, and that's something I think is really cool, is like seeing those different variations of maybe props that you wouldn't normally see in other scenarios. So I thought that was cool hearing you say that crossover.
I've never thought of a Hello Kitty stormtrooper helmet, but now I want one just so I can wear it out in public. That sounds incredible.
I'll have to tag you in his content when
Please
we
do.
hop off here. It's really cool. But yeah, he has a whole bunch of crossovers that he does, and he must have 100 stormtrooper helmets. They're just like amazing, and they're beautiful, and they're so colorful.
I love that.
So yeah, I think you'll really enjoy his content. But yeah, that's very cool. As we wrap up here today, I had such a great time talking to you. I feel like I learned so much about you, and I feel like we could have talked for another couple hours here. But is there a place for people who, again, maybe aren't following your content? Where are the best places on the internet where people can follow your work and see what is upcoming for your projects?
Yeah, so you can follow me on TikTok at Odin_actual. You can also follow me at Instagram, where it is Odin.actual. And I will start streaming on Twitch here within the next week or so. And you can follow me at OdinActual with an extra L /.twitch. No, that's not right. It's twitch.tv /OdinActual with an extra L. My bad.
Perfect. Awesome. Tim, again, it was such a pleasure having you on here today. Looking forward to all of your content that you have coming up, particularly that gym series. Stay tuned for that one. But thank you again. And with that said, that is our episode of Meet the Maker.